He got lost. Hoping to find someone at the junkyard to ask for directions, he pulled over. His phone, which held the online maps, had conveniently died. Now only people could guide him back on the right track. That's when he saw her, a little girl. She was crawling through a pile of trash, her tiny hands rummaging through the debris, searching for something. She wore an old jacket. It wasn't even a child's jacket but looked more like something belonging to an elderly woman. It was dark purple and quilted in a diamond pattern. Clearly, it didn't fit her. It was possible she'd found it at this very dump. Her pants, however, were still children's clothing, light blue but already too tight on her small frame. "Hey, kid, what are you doing here?" Ethan rolled down his window and drove closer to the pile where the girl was perched. She stayed silent. Mute, huh? Ethan thought to himself. He stepped out of his car, looking every bit like the kind of man you'd see on the cover of a business magazine. Dressed in a suit, a black tailored coat, and polished shoes, despite being at a dump, he approached the trash pile. Fortunately, the junk was sorted to some extent, and the girl was crawling among wood and textile scraps, not the rotting food waste that could be smelled from miles away. He reached out his hands toward her, intending to help her down. At first, she seemed both wary and sad, but then, gaining a bit of courage, she extended her arms toward him. Ethan picked her up by the underarms and set her down on solid ground. "So, are you going to tell me what you're doing here?" The girl shook her head. "Great, now I have to coax it out of her," Ethan thought. "Alright, fine. I have bananas in the car. Want one?" "Bananas? What are bananas?" the girl asked in a high-pitched voice. "You don't know what bananas are?" Ethan was surprised. "They're a type of fruit. From Africa." "From Africa?" the girl repeated. "Oh, I definitely want to try that." Ethan thought to himself. God, I feel like some kind of creep. Still, he opened the car door for her. The little wanderer was so small that she couldn't climb in without his help. Once she settled inside, though, she seemed perfectly comfortable and even started chatting with him. "Wow, this car is huge. I've never been in one like this. I've only seen cars like this from afar in the city. But back in the village, I've ridden on a tractor. It's big, but not as big as this car." Ethan smiled as he listened to her excitement and reached for the bananas. Peeling one, he handed it to her. "Here, this is a banana, just bite into it. It's soft. What's your name?" "Lily." "Lily, nice to meet you." "Alright, eat first, then you can tell me how and why you ended up here." The girl ate slowly. To Ethan, it seemed like she was trying to delay talking about anything unpleasant. But eventually, the banana was gone, and Lily had no choice but to explain what had brought her to the dump. "You see, I live nearby. With my grandma. I don't have parents. Neighbors call me by this strange word, orphan. I don't like it, it feels so sad, that word. Grandma says that orphan is used for kids who don't have parents. So, even if I don't like it, I'm still an orphan." Oh goodness, what a chatterbox she is. Ethan thought to himself but kept listening to Lily. "Don't interrupt her. Lily, please, go on with your story and get to the point." "The point? I don't even know what that means." The little girl blinked her wide eyes. "So, where was I? Oh yes, I'm an orphan. I live with my grandma not far from here in the village. But grandma's sick. Our village, you see, is old and dying, just like grandma says. There are hardly any people left. The store is only open every other day, and the doctor comes from a neighboring village. He even brings the medicine with him but says he has to go to the city to get it. And grandma says the medicine's already expensive, and the doctor raises the price even more because of the delivery. I didn't really understand much of this until I overheard a conversation between grandma and the doctor. Anatoly Athanamirovich, please, let me take the medicine on credit. I'll pay you back with my next pension, grandma said. Martha Jenkins, I wish I could, but I can't. You'll just ask for more later. And how will you repay it? No, I can't let your debt pile up like a snowball. No, pay first, and then I'll bring the medicine. That's when I realized things were really bad. Grandma said she wouldn't take the medicine because she had set the money aside for my food. Anatoly, the medicine's too expensive. I can't afford it anymore, she told him. That's when I decided I'd sell things I find at the dump. I'm still little, just 6 years old, so people will feel sorry for me and buy from me easily. I've already made a little money. Lily pulled 200 rubles from the pocket of what was either her or her grandma's old coat. I washed them in the local river with soap I took from home and sold them to some old ladies. They probably thought my grandma knitted them. But it wasn't her. I found them at the dump. Do you think this money is enough for Grandma to buy her medicine? Or will she need more? Lily, do you remember the name of the medicine? Ethan was ready to drive to the pharmacy right away and buy a whole box of whatever Lily's grandma needed, just so this little girl would never have to climb through garbage in the cold again. He had a daughter of his own and couldn't imagine her enduring something like this. It was a complete nightmare. She could catch some illness, and then Grandma would need money from who knows where to treat her. Oh, I don't remember. It's a hard name, but it's written down on a piece of paper, and the paper is on our dresser. I don't know. Grandma says it's life-saving medicine. Does that mean it's really important? Will Grandma die without it? Lily asked sadly. It must be, yes, Ethan replied. Well then, thank you, mister, for the banana. It's really delicious. I've never eaten or even seen such a yellow fruit before. But now I have to find something to sell later. Maybe I can even trade it for some medicine, don't you think? She asked hopefully, her voice full of determination. Lily, wait, Ethan said gently. Don't rush. Look, let me suggest something to you. I'm heading to a hospital right now. Their visiting hours end in about 2 hours. You know how to get to the main paved road from here, right? Yes, I do, she answered confidently. Great. Would you be willing to help me? We'll go to the hospital together, and then I'll bring you back to your grandma. She won't worry, I promise. I'll buy her all the medicine she needs and won't ask for anything in return. But no more scavenging in landfills, okay? I'll explain what to do if you need more medicine again. No, Grandma mostly stays home and sleeps these days, Lily said softly. She won't worry. But, mister, she added hesitantly, you really want to help me and my grandma? You won't ask for money? I only have this. She held up her 200 rubles again. No, I won't ask for money, Ethan assured her. I'll just ask you to show me the way. Come on, sweetheart, let's go. I'm in a big hurry. Okay, Lily agreed. You need to turn that way, she pointed as Ethan helped her buckle in. They reached the main road. Now Ethan knew where to go, but Lily couldn't stay silent for long. Mister, where are we going? She asked curiously. Don't call me mister. Just call me Uncle Ethan. It feels more natural, he said, smiling faintly. We're going to see my daughter at the hospital. She's about your age, by the way. Really? Why is she in the hospital? Is she, like my grandma? Is she dying? Lily's innocent question hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He swallowed the lump in his throat. Not dying, he said carefully. She's being treated by a very good children's doctor. She'll get better soon. Ethan pressed his lips together. In reality, he wasn't being truthful. His daughter Emily hadn't woken up for weeks. The doctors said they were fighting for her life, but they couldn't figure out what was wrong. They treated her symptoms based on how her body responded, but so far, Emily's body hadn't responded at all. She remained unconscious. Lily didn't ask more about the hospital, noticing the sadness that clouded Ethan's face. Instead, she happily chatted about her life in the village, how her grandma used to keep chickens, the radishes growing in their garden, the soft mattresses on their beds, and how her grandma could knit sweaters and socks like no one else. Finally, they arrived at the hospital they needed. Through the car's windshield, Olga peered at the building and asked curiously, Wow, do they treat kids in places like this? Yes, this is a city hospital. We got here pretty quickly, didn't we? Ethan proudly boasted about his car's performance. Wow, I've never been treated in a place like this, Olga admitted. Once, when I was sick at my grandma's, we didn't even call a doctor. Grandma rubbed me with something awful, then used mustard plasters and made me breathe over steaming potatoes. She wrinkled her nose. I've hated potatoes ever since. Ethan chuckled. Well, they won't make you do that here. They treat patients differently, with equipment, injections, IVs, or pills. It depends on the case. Olga looked thoughtful. And how do they treat your daughter? Right now, she's on an IV because she hasn't woken up yet. But you said she's getting better. Olga pointed out shrewdly. Ethan was surprised by her sharp observation. You're right, he admitted with a sigh. My Emily is very sick. The chief doctor himself is treating her, but I believe she'll wake up soon. Believing is good, Olga said softly, her tone contemplative. Ethan wondered what to do with her now. Leave her in the car? She'd probably tear everything apart in there. But how could he take her into the hospital? Maybe as a sister? She vaguely resembled Emily. And who would remember exactly what his daughter looked like, except perhaps the chief doctor. Ethan made up his mind. Stay still, I'll get you out of the car, and we'll go to my daughter's room. Ethan helped Olga climb out of the vehicle and explained what would happen next. The girl surprisingly agreed to play along with the plan. To Ethan's astonishment, the guard let them pass without issue. Though the man did frown slightly when he saw a wealthy, neatly dressed man accompanied by a girl in a dirty, worn-out jacket, he said nothing. Good evening, Ethan Harris. Good evening. I know visiting hours end in half an hour, and then it's quiet time for the kids, with the nurses tidying the halls. No need to remind me, Ethan replied through gritted teeth. The chief doctor had mentioned the rules to him several times already. Even though Emily stayed in a private VIP room, and Ethan was a respected figure, the rules were the same for him as for any other parent. On one hand, it annoyed him. He could pay anyone any amount to spend more time with his daughter. On the other hand, it reassured him that Emily was in a hospital where order and discipline mattered, even in such details. Taking Olga's hand, Ethan headed toward the stairs. They needed to go up to the second floor. Room 215. Ethan opened the door. As always, no one was there except his little girl. She lay motionless, as if asleep. But Ethan knew she wasn't asleep. She was unconscious. He gently nudged Olga into the room. She turned her head left and right, wide-eyed at the bright, spacious hospital. "Oh, is this your daughter?" she asked. "Yes, her name is Emily." "Emily. That's a pretty name. It suits her." "Uncle Ethan, she's still asleep, right? She hasn't woken up yet?" Ethan let out a heavy sigh. Lily realized there was no point in trying to talk to the worried father right now. He approached his daughter, adjusting her pillow and checking her pulse. Thankfully, it was steady. His gaze shifted to the bedside table near Emily's bed. On it stood an empty bottle, the kind typically used for IV drips. It seemed the nurse had forgotten to remove it after Emily's treatment. The empty bottle caught the attention of the village girl, Lily. Of course, her curiosity wouldn't let her just ignore it. If she had her way, she'd treat the hospital like a museum, exploring and touching everything. She picked up the bottle, turning it over in her hands. Then, as she began to read the label, her voice hesitated. "It's in Chinese." At first, Ethan thought the girl was just babbling nonsense. But when he noticed how intently she was studying the label, he asked in surprise. "Wait, can you read Chinese?" "Yes," Lily replied confidently. "And I can translate it too." "Seriously?" Ethan was taken aback. "All right, prove it. Read something from this label and tell me what it says." Lily nodded, her brows furrowing as she focused. A few moments passed as she tried to find the right words. This big word here, she pointed to the name of the medicine. "I can't translate it. It's too complicated. Like it's overly technical." "That's okay. It's just the name of the medicine," Ethan reassured her, intrigued. "Can you read anything else?" "Yes," Lily said eagerly. "One, here it says each drop of this medicine contains, how do I translate this? 200 milligrams of active substance." "What?" Ethan couldn't believe his ears. He took the bottle from Lily and examined it himself. The text was entirely in Chinese. Grabbing his phone, he opened a translation app and took a picture of the label. Technology these days, he thought, dozens of languages at your fingertips, translating in seconds. As the app processed the text, Ethan started reading the translation. While it wasn't perfect, Chinese translations often came out awkward. It was clear enough for him to understand two alarming things. First, the dosage being administered to Emily was absurdly high. The chief doctor treating her had claimed 75 milligrams was the maximum safe dose for her age. But this bottle clearly indicated 200 milligrams. Second, the medication wasn't even for her condition. Its name didn't match what the chief doctor had told him. Two possibilities came to Ethan's mind. Either they had switched to a different treatment method and failed to inform him, or the translation app was making errors and mistranslating the medicine's name. But then there was a darker, more unsettling thought. What if they were deliberately giving his child the wrong medication to keep her from recovering? For some reason, Ethan felt this explanation fit the situation too well. "You've been a big help, little one," Ethan said aloud, addressing Lily. "Really? What's wrong, Uncle Ethan? Tell me, did I translate it correctly?" She bombarded him with questions, her voice full of curiosity. "All right, my dear, let's put questions aside for now. We're not waiting for the doctors. We're heading to a place called a biochemistry lab. I need to get more information about this medication, And if I manage to find out what I need and you don't ask unnecessary questions along the way, I'll explain the whole situation to you. Deal? Lily mimed, zipping her lips shut, and Ethan nodded approvingly, taking the scrappy girl by the hand. In his other hand, he grabbed the empty bottle and quickly led her out of the hospital. The lab wasn't far, so they got there in no time. This time, Lily waited by the security desk on the first floor while Ethan headed upstairs to meet an old acquaintance, Dmitry Vich, a toxicologist who worked at the lab. Few people knew about Ethan's connections. The two had met by chance during their college days and, while they rarely kept in touch, they'd helped each other out of tight spots back then despite being in different departments. Lenya, just tell me, can you do the analysis today? Ethan asked, his voice firm. Of course, no problem. By this evening, you'll have your results, Dmitry promised. Ethan felt a surge of hope. His daughter's life depended on whether this medication was harmful or not. Should he rush to save Emily or leave her under medical supervision? Damn it, they couldn't have made such a huge mistake. It's not just an error, it's a disaster, he thought bitterly. If Emily had been given the wrong drug, it would explain why she hadn't woken up. Maybe the medication had even worsened her condition. I swear I'll tear them apart, he fumed silently. Still, he clung to a shred of hope that the empty bottle had somehow ended up in the room by accident, or that the residue inside would confirm the prescribed medication. But he wasn't sure of anything anymore. All he could do was wait for the lab results. Ethan remembered Lily, patiently waiting downstairs. When he came back out, he asked, "All right, kid, what should I do with you? I could take you home, but how about we grab some food first?" Lily's face lit up. "Sure, where? I'm starving. My stomach's growling like crazy," she said, her chatter unstoppable. "Yeah, not much to find on a trash heap," Ethan muttered under his breath so she wouldn't hear. "How about McDonald's? Ever been there?" Lily shook her head. "What's that?" she asked curiously. "It's a fast food place, not exactly gourmet, but if I remember right, they've got some kids' meals. Let's go." As they drove to the nearest McDonald's, Lily rambled on about how her grandma fed her back in the village and how much she loved the food. Ethan barely listened, his mind far away, consumed with thoughts of Emily and the possibility of her being poisoned. Other memories intruded as well. He realized it had been at least 10 years since he'd set foot in a McDonald's, probably back in his student days. Back then, it was cheap and convenient, but later, with a steady job and eventually his own business, he moved on to better dining options. He could easily have taken the girl to a proper restaurant, but he reminded himself she was a simple village kid. Fancy food might upset her stomach, and besides, she still smelled faintly of the street. He thought with a pang that he'd picked her up from a dumpster. Fast food would be good enough for now. Taking her to a simple cafe seemed like a reasonable idea to him. After all, he himself wouldn't mind reminiscing about the days when he was just a young guy. So, off they went. "Let me help you get down," said Valet, interrupting Lily's long ramble about the village. The girl wasn't offended at all. She caught sight of the cafe sign through the window and gasped with excitement. "Wow, I haven't seen cafes like this in ages," Lily exclaimed, but Valet didn't respond to her. Instead, he took her hand and led her inside. Once there, they placed their order, picked it up and found an empty table. If Valet felt a bit out of place, clean and polished, walking alongside a girl in an old worn-out coat, no one else seemed to care. People were eating, laughing, chatting. Something tugged at Valet's heart. In fancy restaurants, people spoke quietly, almost as if they were in a library. And if they laughed, it felt fake, like actors in a movie playing their roles. "Here, you're supposed to dip this fry into the sauce," Valet explained. Lily frowned. "Uncle Valet, I'm not dumb. I know how to eat," she said, pouting, and stopped talking to him altogether during their meal. "I never thought you were dumb, I just..." But what exactly? Even he couldn't explain why he assumed that now, because he was rich, everyone around him must somehow lack intelligence. What was this bad habit he'd developed, constantly comparing himself to others and putting himself above them? He needed to let that go. Then his thoughts wandered to his daughter. Emily had been born when Valat's bank account already had over 500,000 rubles. Would he take his daughter to a McDonald's now with his wealth? Probably not. He'd take her to a restaurant, claiming it was healthier, always giving her only the best, because she deserved it more than anyone else in the world. Because he loved her. Because she was his favorite. Because, why hasn't she called? "Will you take me to Grandma's after this?" Lily asked, breaking her pout for a moment. "Right. He still needed to take her back to the village, Valet realized, snapping out of his thoughts. Of course. I also need you to show me what medicine your grandmother needs. Do you know where the prescription is? Prescription? Like for pies? What do pies have to do with it? Lily asked, confused. Not pies. Valet chuckled. For someone who claimed to know everything, she sure had her moments. The doctor left you a paper with the medicine name on it. We'll need that. Oh, on the dresser. All right, I'll give you the paper. You'll bring the medicine, right? Grandma really needs it. Don't worry, tomorrow or the day after, I'll bring everything. They ate quickly. Lily liked the food there and promised that once her grandmother recovered, she'd definitely bring her to this place. The girl began chatting away again on various topics, while Ethan found himself slipping back into his own thoughts. He had tried countless times to forget everything. He had tried not to think about it, not even for a second. And for a moment, it seemed he wasn't thinking about it. But the road, the cursed road, kept pulling him back to those events from 6 years ago. It was a relief not to be alone now. Lily's chatter helped keep his mind from dwelling on darker memories. He even made an effort to respond to her now and then. Finally, they arrived at the landfill. Lily showed him a way to bypass it, explaining that houses lay just beyond. Good heavens, Ethan muttered under his breath when he saw the structures Lily affectionately called homes. They were half-rotten, single-story wooden shacks. The season or the constant rain had given the houses a dark brown color with grayish undertones. The windows were old, Soviet-style, secured with makeshift latches. Which one is yours? Ethan managed to ask, the sight of these homes a stark contrast to his own spacious 4-bedroom apartment, where his daughter Emily could easily ride her scooter or bike. That one, with the number 3, the girl replied. The houses were indeed numbered with metal plates, almost like in a city, though there were no street names. Ethan parked the car and helped her climb out of the large vehicle. He followed her to her house. They even had a gate, though it was more a semblance of one, made from wire. Once inside, Ethan barely managed to suppress his gag reflex. The house reeked of mildew, damp wood, and decay. This isn't livable, Ethan thought grimly. He realized that Lily's grandmother might actually have tuberculosis, as the girl hadn't named her grandmother's illness specifically. Take me to your grandmother, he commanded. Startled by his firm tone, Lily quickly ran to the right room. Grandma, Grandma, she called loudly, likely because her grandmother's hearing was poor. I brought a man here. He'll buy us medicine. The old woman lay on her side, facing the wall. She turned towards her granddaughter and smiled weakly. Lily, is that you? Oh, and who's this? She asked, now addressing Ethan. I'm from a charity organization, Ethan said smoothly. Your granddaughter told me you need medicine but can't afford it. Our organization will provide it for free. Just tell me the name of the medicine. His voice carried the same commanding tone as Lily's. Oh, thank goodness you're here. I thought I'd just lie here and die, the old woman said, before breaking into a fit of coughing. Ethan's heart sank, realizing she wasn't exaggerating. Lily, fetch the paper from the dresser where the doctor left it, he instructed. The girl dashed into another room, while Ethan tried to speak with the old woman. Martha Jenkins, do you have tuberculosis? He asked bluntly. The woman's eyes watered from coughing, but she replied, No, son, spit that out. It's just complications from a cold, they say. But how can an old woman like me recover in these conditions? She asked rhetorically. Don't worry, I'll bring you medicine and food in a day or two. Things will get better. Ethan reassured her. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't have much time left. He pitied her deeply but knew he couldn't bring her to his place yet. He had to deal with his own troubles in the city and figure out what was happening with Emily. Lily handed him the paper. He couldn't decipher the doctor's handwriting but hoped the pharmacist would understand. After saying goodbye to Martha Jenkins and Lily, he made her promise never to scavenge at the landfill or earn money by reselling trash again. Do you have a phone? Ethan asked the girl. The phone was there but broken. Now there's none. All right, I see. Look, I'll bring you a new phone. If anything happens, you'll call me, okay? Promise? All right, Lily nodded. But Uncle Ethan, please come quickly. Ethan patted Lily's hair and left. He rushed into the city, knowing his phone barely had any charge left. He managed to power it up slightly using the car, but it was only at 10%. As he got closer to the city, the mobile signal improved. Ethan was finally able to call Elena. Well, what can I say, Ethan? It's bad. The medicine in the bottle does match the label, If you think they're deliberately giving her something useless, you're not wrong to think so. Ethan understood. This was the end. If even a regular hospital wanted his daughter to die, where could he take her for treatment? Emily had initially been admitted because she wasn't feeling well at home. She'd grown weak, exhausted, sluggish. It only worsened by the afternoon, and then she stopped eating altogether. That's when Ethan got worried and first took her to private doctors, who then referred him to the city's main public hospital. This must be some conspiracy, Ethan thought. He wasn't the wealthiest businessman, but at that moment, he felt like he and his daughter were being targeted everywhere. It was clear someone was poisoning her to scare him. It was all because of money, because of his business. This theory began to take root in Ethan's mind. What if he just took Emily out of the hospital and moved her? But not back home, since that's where she initially got sick. Maybe to Lily and her grandmother's place. Sure, the place wasn't ideal for treatment, but at least no one would poison her there. The girl and her grandmother had nothing to gain by hurting Emily. They needed him to bring medicine regularly, and they'd likely protect Emily as if she were their own. Ethan arrived at the children's hospital just as the night shift was about to start. The head doctor was about to leave when he was informed about Ethan's arrival. Furious, Ethan demanded that his daughter be placed on a stretcher and taken to his car in the parking lot. "Is he out of his mind?" the head doctor muttered, rushing to the second floor to Emily's room. There, he saw Ethan insisting that a nurse call orderlies to help move his daughter to his car. "What's going on here?" the head doctor asked. "Father, are you yelling loud enough for the entire hospital to hear? Do you want us to call the police?" "Police? I'll call them myself," shouted Ethan. "I'll have you all locked up for negligence. You're killing my child, poisoning her, and I'm supposed to sit here and take it? Do you think I don't know what's in the IVs you're giving her?" Ethan raged on, but the head doctor acted as if he didn't understand. Blinking blankly, he couldn't make sense of Ethan's accusations. Why was Ethan talking about poisoning? It seemed absurd, but fine, let the police figure it out. Then they could laugh at Ethan's paranoia, the doctor thought. After much commotion, Ethan managed to take his daughter. Exhausted, he drove home, unable to muster the strength to head to the village. Besides, he had promised not to return to Lily and her grandmother without medicine, and the pharmacy wasn't open 24/7. It would open at 8 a.m. So, he decided to risk it. Emily wasn't conscious anyway, and one night at home wouldn't change anything, even if someone really had poisoned her at their house. Only who? Even Ethan couldn't figure that out. Maybe it was the cook Ellen, who came by once a day to bring food she prepared for the family. There was no one else it could be. There was no staff, and Ethan usually worked from home. Neither he nor Emily needed anyone around. A week went by. As planned, Ethan took Emily and her belongings to Zina and Ivanovna's place. He brought along plenty of warm clothing for his daughter, so she could stay cozy in the wooden house. Surprisingly, Zina and Ivanovna quickly started taking the medicine Ethan had purchased from the pharmacy. For him, the cost was insignificant, but he knew it was a big deal for the elderly woman and her granddaughter. Zina began moving around the house more easily, and together with Lily and Ethan, they lit the stove. Little Lily, as it turned out, had an incredible knack for cooking. Using the basic ingredients Ethan had brought from the city, she prepared numerous meals for herself and her grandmother over the course of the week. Emily, at first, remained unconscious. Ethan began to think he might have made a mistake, that he shouldn't have taken his daughter out from under the doctor's care. But by the 5th day, Ethan heard faint sounds from Emily's room. She was groaning. "Oh, thank God." Zina and Ivanovna crossed themselves with joy and rushed in with a glass of water for the girl. So she was poisoned, Ethan thought to himself, convinced yet again. Now, all that remained was proving and accusing the suspected criminal. Naturally, his suspicion immediately fell on the hospital's chief doctor, who had suspiciously tried to dissuade Ethan from treating Emily himself and urged him to leave her under their care. The doctor had also been the one directly treating Emily. He could have instructed the nurses to administer harmful substances through her IV that weren't meant for treating her condition but instead contained dangerous levels of toxic chemicals. But did Ethan plan to hand the case over to the police that easily? Absolutely not. This attack on his daughter's life seemed far too complex for that. Ethan believed that if the case was turned over to the authorities, it would be shelved within weeks, pinning everything on the chief doctor, while other accomplices would remain free to threaten him and his daughter. Ethan hired a private investigator and eagerly awaited the results of his independent investigation. 5 days later, when Emily had fully regained consciousness but still remained on bed rest, the detective arrived at the village to speak with all witnesses and Emily's father. Well, what can I say? Ethan, does the name Robert Harris mean anything to you? Yes, of course, that's my father. And then Ethan learned a truth so shocking it made his hair stand on end. It turned out that his accusations against the hospital's chief doctor were unfounded. The doctor truly hadn't known what was happening to Emily and had used all his professional expertise to try to save her. But someone else had interfered, and that person was an ordinary nurse. Her name was Sophia. She was a 35-year-old woman, a mother of several children herself. Yet that hadn't stopped her from silencing her conscience and committing regular acts of cruelty against human life. However, even she was just a pawn in the larger scheme. The mastermind behind the attempt on Emily's life was none other than Ethan's father, Robert. What a revelation! At first, Ethan didn't believe the detective. He yelled at him, but the detective stood firm, claiming he wasn't lying and that there was evidence. To understand when this sinister plan to kill a little girl had begun, one needed to look back a bit into the past. Specifically, 10 years ago, when our protagonist was just a college student who loved grabbing lunch at McDonald's. Ethan was about 20 years old at the time. He already knew David, but only casually, just enough for a quick hello and goodbye. When Ethan was younger, he didn't care much about male friendships because love consumed most of his time. This love had a name, Valentina, or simply Sarah. Sarah was a year behind Ethan in college. She was the one who first reached out to Ethan on social media. Initially, the young woman wanted to ask Ethan about professors, exams, and assignments he had already taken. Ethan was happy to help, but he couldn't help noticing the beautiful photo she had as her profile picture. After liking nearly all her photos on her page, he decided to skip subtlety and asked Sarah out for a walk. To his surprise, she agreed. They quickly discovered they had much in common, from music to books. During their walk, they talked about everything and realized how aligned their tastes and interests were. Physically, they matched well too, so it wasn't long before they started dating. However, Ethan's father, Robert, wasn't happy about this relationship. Robert, a hard-working factory worker, had always placed immense expectations on his son. Since Ethan was a child, he had been told to uphold the family's honor, work hard, and rise above their modest life to claim a top spot in society. This upbringing made Ethan incredibly ambitious but also burdened him with an unrelenting need to prove his worth to others. It was a trait ingrained in him from an early age. Ethan's mother had been ill and passed away when he was young. Despite her illness, she always showed kindness to her son and often argued with her husband, forbidding him from being too strict. "Our son needs to grow up as a person, not some mechanical drone," she would say. She wanted Ethan to pursue his interests, like figure skating, which he loved and dreamed of mastering. However, Robert dismissed it. Figure skating is for girls. Chess builds the mind, and boxing develops strength and agility, skills he'll need for his future career, he insisted. If not for his father's guidance, Ethan might not have become an entrepreneur. Robert was proud when Ethan's business began to thrive. But one thing still upset him, Valentina. "There's nothing decent about that girl," Robert would say. "She'll ruin you, and you just let her." "Dad, Sarah has been with me through everything, thick and thin. We've been together since college. She's a good person, and I know she'll make a great wife," Ethan would counter. "A wife? Number I strongly suggest, no, I demand, that you find someone more suitable than this clueless girl," Robert would snap. "I can't even look at her without feeling sick. If she doesn't drain your money, she'll surely waste your life." No matter how much Ethan argued, it was futile. His father couldn't accept that Ethan had fallen so deeply in love with someone. When the wedding came, it wasn't a grand celebration. Robert didn't attend, not the ceremony, not the reception. On what should have been a joyous day for Ethan, his father stayed home, drank tea and beer, ate some snacks, and watched soccer as if it were any ordinary day. Ethan tried calling his father several times, but Robert didn't answer. It was his way of expressing disapproval, showing he was hurt by his son's defiance. The day after the wedding, Ethan brought his wife to visit his father, and an argument broke out right there in front of everyone. It was awkward, unpleasant, and downright disrespectful to his new wife. But Ethan, not wanting to sever ties with his only family member, continued to communicate with Robert despite their constant conflicts. Life moved forward for the young couple. Ethan purchased the apartment they had dreamed of, and the two started their journey together. Then came the news that changed everything. Sarah was pregnant. The joy was overwhelming. Tears of happiness filled Ethan's eyes as he called his father to share the news. And what about Robert? He simply hung up. No congratulations, no excitement, no anger, just silence followed by a slow dial tone. Ethan couldn't bring himself to confront his father about how deeply such indifference hurt. "How can I make you understand that I love her, and she loves me?" Ethan said, exhausted. "You can't, Ethan. I'm convinced she's lying to you. That child isn't yours," Robert snapped. "Why do you hate her so much? Am I incapable of having a child? Why is it so hard for you to believe she's carrying my baby? She's with me every night after work. What's wrong with you?" Ethan's voice trembled. "Who knows what she does at her job?" Robert muttered. Ethan threw up his hands in frustration. This stubbornness seemed unshakable. Neither words nor actions could break through. Robert remained firm in his belief, blaming Ethan and his wife for every conceivable fault. Then came Emily. She was nothing short of an angel, but her life would not remain peaceful for long. Routine pediatric checkups were part of life. It was supposed to be just another visit to the clinic. Ethan drove the car. Sarah held Emily in her arms in the back seat. The trip was only supposed to take 15 minutes. That's all. But in those 15 minutes, everything changed. Ethan was careful. He knew he was driving with his beloved wife and precious daughter. But reckless drivers on the road didn't share his caution. Just minutes away from the clinic, a rusted sedan driven by young men slammed into the back of Ethan's car. They had been speeding, and their brakes failed them. Though the men in the sedan survived with severe injuries, Sarah shielded Emily with her body. The baby survived, but Sarah's injuries were fatal. Ethan was in shock. He had never been in an accident before, and now, for the first time, he had not only been in one but lost the love of his life. Grief consumed Ethan. Meanwhile, his father seemed detached. Robert found solace in the thought that Ethan was now free from that woman. But one issue remained. The granddaughter. A child he didn't believe was Ethan's and never wanted to accept. "Ethan, take a DNA test. It costs you nothing and gives us peace of mind." "Whose peace of mind?" Ethan shouted. "Even if she isn't biologically mine, which I don't believe for a second, I love Emily. She's my daughter, no matter what." Robert couldn't understand why his request was so unreasonable. If the child wasn't Ethan's, he thought he could convince him to put her up for adoption and start fresh. He even envisioned a better future for his son. A clean slate, a new wife, someone smart, beautiful, and accomplished. He already had a few candidates in mind. None of them were anything like Sarah, who had barely completed her bachelor's degree. No, Robert had grand ambitions. In his mind, there was no place for Emily, nor for the memory of her mother. If he didn't take action, he wouldn't find peace. It blazed in his mind like a glaring red warning light. The thought consumed him day and night. He had to get rid of the child. The old man couldn't sleep well otherwise. One sleepless night, Robert developed a splitting headache. Yet, amidst the pain, he finally figured out what to do with the girl he saw as a weight dragging Ethan down. It had taken 6 long years to reach this conclusion. He approached the living room cabinet and opened the bottom drawer. Inside lay all the money Robert had saved throughout his life. There was so much cash it wouldn't fit in a single bank account. "If you won't play nice, I'll play dirty," Robert muttered under his breath. Perhaps it was some sort of mental disorder, but his obsession wouldn't leave him alone. He hated everyone connected to Sarah, except, of course, his son. He took some of the money and headed to China. Ethan was thrilled, thinking his father was finally taking a break. Maybe he'd even return kinder. Meanwhile, his granddaughter Emily eagerly asked for a souvenir. "Grandpa, can you bring me something from China?" she had asked sweetly. Robert had nodded with a forced smile, replying, "Of course, sweetheart, I'll bring you a gift." And he did, but the gift wasn't for her. Instead, he handed it to Sophia, a nurse and the wife of a former co-worker from his factory. By coincidence, Sophia worked at the city children's hospital. Robert offered her a deal. If she poisoned his granddaughter, she'd get the rest of the money, and he'd use his connections to promote her to chief physician. Initially hesitant, Sophia was convinced by her husband. "All it takes is a few incorrect IV doses," her husband had reasoned. "It's not that hard, and nothing too criminal. Kids die every day. Why not secure a better life for our family? We can finally afford a seaside vacation for the kids." Sophia, though careless by nature, went along with the plan. However, her sloppiness led to her getting caught. Now Ethan listened to the detective's account, his jaw dropping in disbelief. He couldn't fathom that the father he'd once respected had fallen so far. "Are you telling me my father's a murderer?" Ethan asked, stunned. "Yes," the detective confirmed. "We have evidence. We even recorded a conversation between Robert and Sophia. Would you like to hear it? Ethan recognized his father's voice immediately. He had never met Sophia at the hospital, but the recording was undeniable. In it, Robert discussed when to deliver more medicine, but Sophia informed him that Emily was no longer at their hospital. This revelation had stunned Robert, who had promised to call his son to confront him but never managed to connect, likely due to poor reception in the village. Ethan found himself utterly confounded, his mind racing to untangle the horrifying web of revelations. How could his father, the man he had once held in such high regard, have smuggled dangerous substances all the way from China? The sheer logistics of it seemed baffling. Had he used smugglers? Or perhaps he'd orchestrated some elaborate scheme to bypass customs altogether? The thought alone was dizzying. Ethan's thoughts spiraled, each question more unsettling than the last. Despite his shock, one thing became abundantly clear to him. This was now beyond his comprehension or control. The police needed to step in, and quickly. The evidence against his father was undeniable. Recorded conversations, witnesses, and even a motive, they all painted a chillingly clear picture of guilt. Yet, what disturbed Ethan the most wasn't just the heinous nature of his father's actions, but his own lack of remorse. He felt no pity, no sorrow, no yearning to understand. Instead, there was a cold detachment, a numbness that startled him. Was this apathy a defense mechanism, or had his father's betrayal truly severed any remaining ties of love and loyalty? He didn't know, and for the first time in his life, he didn't care. In the back of his mind, darker suspicions began to form, shadows creeping into his thoughts. Could this man, his father, have been responsible for other misfortunes that had plagued their family? An accident perhaps, or something even more sinister? The possibility hung heavy, a storm cloud hovering over his fractured trust. Yet, as quickly as these notions surfaced, a small, persistent voice of reason pushed them aside. There was no evidence for such claims, no proof to support these accusatory whispers. Ethan clung to that rationality, knowing that, without it, he might drown in the tide of his emotions. Ultimately, he reminded himself, what was done could not be undone. The damage had already been inflicted, the betrayals already committed. There was no going back, no way to rewrite the past. The only path forward lay in seeking justice and ensuring the safety of those his father had harmed. The weight of it all pressed heavily on Ethan's shoulders, but he resolved to carry it nonetheless.